Restoring men in history. Thomas Jefferson destroyed big government and debt. Elon Musk is trying to do it. We've got a clip from Musk. We've got a quote to start out with Thomas Jefferson. Let's go. Thomas Jefferson said this: I, however, place economy among the first and most important of Republican virtues, and public debt as the greatest of the dangers to be feared. Bold and important. Thomas Jefferson believed it. Elon Musk believes it. Many of us believe we've got to reduce this debt for your freedom and independence. Going on, we see in England the consequences of the want of it. Their laborers reduced to live on a penny in the shilling of their earnings, to give up bread and resort to oatmeal and potatoes for food, and their landholders exiling themselves to live in penury and obscurity abroad. Because at home the government must have all the clear profits of their land. In fact, they see the fee simple of the island transferred to the public creditors, all its profits going to them for their interest of their debts. Our laborers and landholders must come to this also, unless they severely adhere to the economy you recommend. Thomas Jefferson, July 1816, to William Plummer. We don't want you to have to eat bread and skip meat, bacon, sausage, and the great things of life, and steaks and ribeyes, because of government spending and inflation, debt and deficits, and what Congress has been doing for decades. We want you to live well and have a high standard of living. Today, the interest on the debt is one of the top problems in our government. Increasing your cost, decreasing your purchasing power. So if the government creates too much debt, simple put, you'll pay. Doge and Musk. What they're doing is important, but Congress needs to follow up. They need to follow up and reduce the actual size of government and make sure that when we find the waste, fraud, and corruption, this money actually goes to the debt so you have more at the kitchen table, and that we end unconstitutional apartments and keep reducing spending and the size and scope of government. That's the key that Mike Johnson needs to do. Let's go on. Many of the ratifiers and founders stood for what? Freedom, and we even have a slogan, land of the free, home of the brave, right? We want to be the greatest nation much longer. Now in Jefferson, he had said that in 1816, but he had accomplished it as president before that. He did not just talk, he did it. Rare, but as a president, rare as a person, but he did do it. Now, Thomas Jefferson served as our third president, 1801 to 1809. When he came into office, debt was high. DownsizingGovernment.org, Chris Edwards, figure 1, shows the basic story. Federal spending rose under Washington and Adams, but then flattened under Jefferson between 1801 and 1809. Get this, federal debt fell from $83 million in 1801 to $57 million in 1809. That's an amazing accomplishment for Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson did just not say it, he did it. And remember, during the time, he had also made the Louisiana Purchase for $13 million. The success of Jefferson, Chris Williams goes on to say, and his Treasury Secretary Gallatin in reducing debt came not from cuts to overall spending, but from simply ensuring that revenue increases from a growing economy went toward paying down the debt rather than expanding the government. And here's the key: when we find corruption, fraud, waste, we've got to put it onto the debt, not just move from department to department. And Mike Johnson and them and the Congress has to work to end unconstitutional agencies and actually eliminate departments and agencies, and very much downsize them at the minimum. Okay, Jefferson followed through on another promise. Chris Edwards states, Jefferson and Gallatin were the first advocates of starve the beast policies. Jefferson promised that he would repeal all internal taxes if elected, and he followed through in 1802. Internal taxes raised just 8% of revenue, but Jefferson and Gallatin observed that they required what? Get this, you ready? We're dealing with it today, a big bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is the word of today. It took a huge bureaucracy, Jefferson discovered, to collect the imposed compliance cost on citizens and abused civil liberties as well. And we want freedom in America, right? So we don't want that. So big bureaucracy, less freedom. Big bureaucracy, more regulations, more difficult for you to start a business, impeding you and your liberty. So Jefferson-Gallatin policy was to kill the most inefficient and odious type of tax. Mike Meharry from 10th Amendment Center states, in fact, since 1940, get this, every successive presidential administration has spent more than the previous administration in inflation-adjusted dollars. Jefferson lowered taxes and cut the budget. Fantastic accomplishment. 3 cheers for Jefferson, the man. Many people today say you can't do it. If we have the will to do it, and you, the American people, have the will to make it happen lawfully and peacefully, we can make it happen. Congress needs to have the will and desire to make it happen. And that will take the vigilance of the American people. Next, from the 10th Amendment Center of Mike Maharrey, how'd they do it? He says they cut spending and applied the savings toward paying down the debt. So they did both, and watch the spending they cut. Summed up in his budget policy in a letter to Elbridge Gerry in 1799, I am for a government rigorously frugal and simple, applying all the possible savings of the public revenue to the discharge of the national debt, and not for a multiplication of officers and salaries merely to make partisans, and for increasing by every device the public debt on the principle of its being a public blessing. Right now, Elon is making recommendations to eliminate jobs, save you money at the kitchen table, let you and allow you to buy more sausage, meat. Save your money, reduce the debt. Despite facing a number of contingencies going on, Jefferson limited federal spending, keeping total outlays flat between 8 and 10 million throughout his presidency. Jefferson said it, and he did it. Democratic Republicans held costs down by cutting the federal bureaucracy. That's what we're trying to do now. That's what must happen. And you know what Musk says, you know what we say. We got a problem. To survive, we've got to eliminate a lot of this debt. Can today's Republicans do what they did then? Of course, if they have the will and desire. Democratic Republicans held costs down by cutting the federal bureaucracy. As they managed to do this with a federal workforce just totaling, get this, 130 employees. There wasn't much to cut, so Jefferson went to the part of the budget where money was being spent, the military. He argued that funding a standing army in peacetime was a colossal waste of money. They argued about that at the Constitutional Convention. They argued about that in the ratification process. They were also weary of standing armies from a principle of tyranny and freedom. In his first message to Congress, Jefferson wrote, quote, sound principles will not justify our taxing the industry of our fellow citizens to accumulate treasure for wars to happen we know not when, and which might not perhaps happen but from the temptations offered by that treasure. Look at today. You could argue NATO and the UN and all these organizations, at least NATO, what's going on in Ukraine, offering a way for war, right? You build up the military-industrial complex, fund both sides of the war, and you've got the military-industrial complex happy and all those military manufacturing companies happy, while people die and while your debts and the debt and the deficits go up. In his first message to Congress, Jefferson wrote, sound principles will not justify our taxing the industry of our fellow citizens to accumulate treasure for wars to happen we know not when, and which might not perhaps happen but from the temptations offered by that treasure. Look at the temptations of NATO. What does the military-industrial complex want? They want wars. They want to sell weapons, maybe to both sides, right? So think of what Jefferson would think of the United Nations, NATO, and the military-industrial complex today. If you have the money sitting there, and NATO's there. All right, what did Congress do? Congress responded to Jefferson's message, reducing the Army to 3,000 soldiers and 172 officers. It also cut the Navy to 6 frigates and reduced the number of foreign embassies to only 3, Britain, France, and Spain. Now think how far we are away from the founding today. So Congress went along with the cuts then. Today, they've just been increasing the debt ceiling, right? Spending more and more money, making life more difficult for Americans. Thomas Jefferson was a hero for limited government. We need to return to that. Doge is showing the fraud, waste, and corruption, and showing you why we needed the limited government that was ratified, and why we need to return to that, and restrain the federal government when they go beyond their enumerated powers. $36 trillion past that now has been spent, damaging the American dream, freedom, and Americans. Jefferson said this, it is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes. A principle which, if acted on, would save 1/2 the wars of the world. A letter to Antoine Louis Claude de Tracy of December 26, 1820. Here's Elon Musk with similar thoughts. Go to cut.
But we do have an opportunity to do kind of a once-in-a-lifetime deregulation and reduction in the size of government. Because the other thing, besides the regulations, America is also going bankrupt extremely quickly. And everyone seems to be sort of whistling past the graveyard on this one.
They're all grabbing the silverware. Everyone's stuffing their pockets with the silverware before the Titanic sinks. It's like,
Well, the Defense Department budget is a very big budget. Okay, it's $1 trillion a year. DoD, Intel, it's $1 trillion. And interest payments on the national debt just exceeded the Defense Department budget. They're over $1 trillion a year, just in interest, and rising. We're adding $1 trillion to our debt, which our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay somehow. Every 3 months, and then soon it's going to be every 2 months, and then every month, and then the only thing we'll be able to pay is interest. And if this is, it's just it's just like a person at scale that has racked up too much credit card debt, and this does not have a good ending.
Elon Musk is doing his part. He said it. He's kept his promise. Trump is doing his part. He said it. He's kept his promise. Who's it up to now? It's up to the American people, you and me, and it's up to Congress. And we got to be vigilant and lawfully and peacefully push Congress to do their jobs now and make these cuts permanent when they find them and not just move them around. Here's to freedom. Thank you.